because let's get us back to the Super Bowl a little bit because you know getting into the Bengals, what really got them beat was that offensive line, and nobody was surprised. And Bengals and Burrow are bad for football. We talked about it in the pre-production, about the Matt Ryan, the Joe Flacco, and the Andy Dalton, getting to the playoffs early. But what Joe Flacco has done is turning this team around in 2 years and getting them to the playoffs. Nobody believes it's fucking Zach Taylor. Everybody believes it's Joe Burrow and his Piper mentality, which I tried to say Baker Mayfield was, but the problem is ain't nobody following Baker because he's not good. But Joe Burrow,
he's not good, and honestly, he doesn't have the swagger.
No, because he's not good. And you got Joe Burrow, you got Jamar Chase, which also goes against everything football, like we believe in football. You draft a receiver over a top end lineman who actually had a really good season when your line isn't good. Huh? Excuse me. But it worked for them this year. Now let's contextualize it. Baker was hurt and he sucked. Big Ben was a corpse. I think whoever plays quarterback for the Steelers next year, they'll be a better team just because they'll have a quarterback who can throw the ball. Right. The Ravens got beat up by the injury bug. So this is why
the season even kicked off.
Yeah. And I mean, hell, by like week 8, week 9, the Ravens were still in playoff contention. They were a 1 seed at one point during the season. Like, yeah. I just hope too many teams don't look at what the Bengals did and go, you know what? Quarterback year 2, year 3. Hey, Justin Herbert, we need you in the Super Bowl next year. Brandon Staley, you terrible game managing head coach, Mr. I go for it on 4th down just because it's 4th down. We need you in the Super Bowl next year. And they actually start making bad moves that try to elevate their timeline before they actually are ready to get there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And everything did fall right for the Bengals. Their division fell apart. Even their playoff run. I mean, let's look at it. Did it not set up perfectly for them? They got a home game against the Raiders, who probably had the most dysfunction of any team outside of maybe the Jaguars. And the Jaguars weren't even dysfunctional as a team. They just had a dysfunctional coach. And so, but the Raiders across the board were
bad roster.
Huh?
In a bad roster.
And think about it. They played Cincinnati. That's the famous Herb Stays game now that I look at it. They were in that game, if you remember. That game ended on a game-winning field goal.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, they played the Raiders, and then the next game you get a Titans team that, for all intents and purposes, was a cupcake one. Ryan Tannehill can't throw the fucking ball.
Derrick Henry
hadn't played a game in two and a half months. And granted, good pass rush for the Titans, but that was still one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Julio is no longer Julio Jones. He's not the same Julio. I think A.J. Brown's overrated. So I just think that the cards fell right. And then you get the Chiefs, who, all right, we'll give you credit. You beat Pat Mahomes, in Chiefs Kingdom, at Arrowhead, right? But at the end of the day, even that matchup lined up well for them because of how bad the Chiefs secondary was. All they had to do was throw the ball on them.
They got Sorensen back there, and their pass rush wasn't worth a damn. And Bill Simmons is trying to peddle that Patrick Mahomes was concussed. What are your thoughts?
You said Bill Simmons?
Yeah, he said because there's no way in hell Patrick Mahomes just all of a sudden is that bad.
I don't know what happened. I mean, he was definitely making some dumbass plays. I mean, him running around like that 2nd and 3rd down where they were, basically on the goal line almost. Then, of course, the way that the first half ended, them not kicking that field goal. I mean, to me, I think it was just a meltdown, and it's hard to believe that he would melt down, but that's what I chalk it up to. I believe it was just a meltdown.
And you know what? I do too, because I think that he's been a front runner for the most of his career. He's played in situations with a lot of house money, and he hasn't had the typical career path with the dysfunction. He hasn't been on a bad roster. So a lot of times, we don't know what we're made of until we have to go through some stuff. And, Patrick Mahomes played in a few more closer games this year. Last year in the Super Bowl, he played in a game where his team wasn't the best team on the field, and he wasn't good. And he reverted back to who he was in college, which is why he wasn't the first overall pick,
But back on to the Bengals and Burrow. Yeah, and think about it. You know what the Bengals did to themselves too? And I know that they don't like to spend money, from my understanding. They're a notoriously cheap organization.
Oh, yeah, cheapest.
Yeah, kind of like the Braves. But we got a World Series, so who cares? But the Braves aren't cheap. But nonetheless, you look at – they just extended Zach Taylor to what? I think 2026. And next year would have been the last year of his contract, I believe.
Yeah, I would have let
him play it out. I'm like, bro, you went 2-14, which thank you, that helped us get Joe Burrow. But then the next year, I get it, he got hurt halfway through, but shit, he was still like 1-6 once he went down. So it ain't like
they weren't good
winning games even then. And then this year, you guys went out and spent money on some very solid defensive players. Drafted a superstar wide receiver, already a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. And you got a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.